We were named number one best agency in the world. So it was a big holy moment. But I'd say so much of that sort of drive and competitive spirit came from my days of playing footy. I didn't think I'd be at the stage where I'm going into founder mentality, but I'm loving being in that space. I'm a person that likes to be in control. Surprise, surprise.
Shocked.
And the last 6 months has been quite shocking in some of the things I haven't been able to control.
Welcome to Stories Untold, live from Cairns Crocodiles. We're unpacking the stories we carry but don't always tell, the stories we've untold ourselves and the stories that are still being written. In this series, we're going to spotlight the overlooked, the unpolished and the unspoken experiences that have shaped some of Australia's most creative and influential minds. Let's dive in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a very special episode of Stories Untold. I am joined by the always lovely Mel Fein. Now, Mel is the Managing Director of Media at Accenture Song, one of Australia's most influential marketing and media leaders, and she has a career spanning broadcast, agency, and now consultancy, and is famous for bringing both commercial clarity and creative nous to every role and every team that she's built. Mel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Mel, when people ask you what you do, what do you tell them?
It's definitely changed over time, that answer. And it depends if I'm having a conversation with my hairdresser or someone that's kind of in the industry, right? So I think if it's, someone who doesn't know much of us, it's of the industry, it's, a bit of just marketing, advertising. And I full stop there. Yeah. And very rarely do you get, oh, does that mean an agency or does that mean something else? So usually I'm happy with a full stop because also one thing about me is I hate small talk. So if people are asking me, what do I do? That probably generally means that I probably don't need to be talking to them.
Vision
as well.
Of you sitting at a hairdresser's mute.
Yeah, no, and you know what? These are my moments of downtime, right? So I'm happy not to expand. People who probably are a bit more familiar is what are you doing now? Yeah. Usually is a different sort of way of phrasing that question. I think, interestingly, my answers changed so much because for the last probably 8 years, it was CEO of a media agency, right? Now it's I'm talking founder energy now. So thank you for the wonderful introduction. Yes, Accenture is sort of built around consultancy, but I don't really say I work at Accenture in consulting. Yeah. I say I'm a founder and I'm building a global practice, something completely new to Accenture. We're bringing in this founder energy, which is very different energy, into a business that's effectively quite, just traditional in their structure.
Yeah, well-established, mature.
Well-established and amazing in how they're innovative and, building out as the world's largest tech firm. So you go into that and you're how do I find my place in that? But I think the way that and when I say we, I talk about myself, but also Sam and Chris, who I moved over with.
Shout out to the other two musketeers.
Yeah. Yes, we do call ourselves the three musketeers. But effectively, that's what we're sort of describing ourselves, not just in the industry, but around Accenture and to clients that we're starting to talk to, is because we've got completely new energy. So I didn't think I'd be, at the stage where I'm going into founder mentality, but I'm loving being in that space.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's a story that not many people know, that few of us have heard, but says everything about you?
Interesting. So I'd say probably, there's a couple of different things in that. It's you get to this point in your career and you sort of want to reflect on where's the DNA come from of my intense fire and energy around winning and that sort of competitive spirit. And in the last few years, I've sort of dug deep on understanding some of that DNA of myself, and probably it came from, honestly, the ages of 5 and 6, where my dad was, one of sort of an executive at the Melbourne Football Club, an AFL club growing up. I had two brothers that despised football, being a Melbourne girl growing up, and I somehow got the AFL gene. This was way before AFL women's was even sort of a thing. And I spent probably those first 10 years from the age of 5 to 15 going around the country with my dad in the Melbourne Football Club team, and even an under-19 team in the reserves, and then into the senior team, going to the weirdest places around Australia, even during pre-seasons. And my obsession at the age of 12 and 13 was sitting in quarter-time huddles and half-time huddles, listening to coaches talking about high performance and 1%ers that I got obsessed with at that age. And I was I love and thrive in high performance environments. And I really started thinking, how can I build and adapt myself? Like, what does that high performance energy look like for me? And there were only two options for females back then. It was really you get into administration or you write about the sport but there was not many sort of entry level pieces like that. So I actually sort of created what was the first AFL women's club at a private Melbourne girls' school it was a co-ed school that I went to, and we were the first 18 women's football club that sort of got established back then, and I was a captain. And I think from then, we started playing other schools, and the rest is history of how wonderfully the league has been built out. But I'd say so much of that sort of drive and competitive spirit came from my days of playing footy.
Such an amazing answer. It's just everything about you that I would have never known. Looking at your career, right, and you've been meteorically successful in the media space, is there a point in time that's this real before and after, right? The sort of BCAD point where you look back and you go, that was the fork in the road where things shifted gear or changed, or I changed?
No, there have been many moments that I think I've been proud of along the way, and I've given myself some really North Star points that I want to be here by the age of X, and I want to get to this point, and I'm not successful if I'm not doing X, Y, and Z by this stage. And so I think what was difficult in navigating through the career is, they talk about it in growing up as a female in a career where probably back 20, 30 years ago, getting into advertising is very different for females. And so definitely had this imposter syndrome. And I'd say elements of success that probably the general public would see, I never felt success by those moments. And I always felt that I still had something to prove. And I was so driven in just proving in this, what's next for me? What's next? Yes, that's good. And yes, I achieved that. But it was I just was so relentless on myself.
Yeah.
And, I think that came at the sacrifice and some things in my own personal life, I'd say as well. But it was something that I was really driving for. And it was probably wasn't just, in agency land, an account win or something that would be seen as a great metric of success. For me, it became bigger than that. And I'd probably say I took on, I was a young CEO when I first started. Over 13 years ago, I got the CEO title. And, I went in and I was like, oh my God, I sent myself to Harvard for a couple of weeks and I was like, I'm going to be the best CEO and try and work this out. But I inherited something that was really tough at the time. And I've talked about this, but, an agency that was at the time very homogenized, very vanilla, lacked good talent, lacked good client portfolio. And so I set myself out a task, and the usual task would be win accounts, get better people, produce good work, and probably you're going to get some success.
Sounds so simple, yeah.
Sounds so simple. So you set all those metrics and you start to achieve some of those metrics. You build a team, you do this, you do that. But, by the end of year one, we were 27 in agency land in terms of rankings. And, I was like, I want to get to number one. But with my crazy ambition that I talked about, I didn't want to get to number one in Australia. I wanted to get to number one in the world. And people were like, are you crazy, little old Australia doing this? It's I'm going to build the best team around me. I'm going to, we just need a couple of good clients to produce some great work. And, you start to build out the recipe.
Starts.
Fast forward a few years ago, we had this moment, and it was probably one of the most proudest moments of my career where, we were 3-4 years into the journey, and I said, I'm going to bring the entire company, the national company together. We're going to create effectively a festival style, taking away for 3 days. We're all going glamping, putting on some big events there, and we're going to say thank you back to our people. But it was what made that trip so special. And we had drones flying over us with the branding of the company and all this sort of stuff. It was at 9:00 that night, the London Global Advertising Awards were happening, and we got the gold. So we were named number one best agency in the world. And it was I was like, holy moly, that was...
You can swear like a sailor.
Okay, cool. So it was a big holy moment. And I just was like, that was so much to process. I actually, while the rest of the team partied through the night, celebrate. I took myself to my room and just had to have a moment of reflection of like all the hard work and one percenters. I talk about the one percenters that the coach talked about quarter time 20 years before me, but that went into that moment. So like the before was everything that led up to that moment. And the after was where to from here. Like we won all the accounts, we got number one in the world.
So then what? What happens then?
Great question. So the after became, so what do? Do you go back to back? Because, good agencies sustain years and years of success, right? Or do you set the dreams even bigger and better? And it was at that moment where we talked about the three musketeers, but, so much about success is never really about me. It's about the team that you build around you. And the nucleus of a lot of that success was Sam and Chris. And so, we started talking about like, what if moments? So, what if we took all the challenges of the industry and all the things that have been frustrating us around genuine, not just like client, brand and customer challenges, but the way that holding companies are now set up and like legacy infrastructure things are set up. What if there was a world where we could create something from complete scratch, but have the investment backed by like, one of the big sort of global firms? And we took that idea and we started talking to people around because it was like, you're either going to build it yourself but then you're another independent agency and you don't have the scale and you don't have this. So that's where it began. And it was years in the make. Don't get me wrong, this stuff doesn't happen overnight, but it became a what's next. And that's the thing. It's always not been, how do I cruise through this? Because I could have just sat there and cruised through
do it again, win it again.
Exactly. Like we could cruise through success, and a lot of executives do, but it was always like, how do I make this even harder for myself, put myself more out of my comfort zone and go again?
If you could wave a magic wand and change three things about the legacy businesses that you worked in for so long, what would they be?
Starting with the traditional model of the way that a team is structured, they're very heavy, manual, laborious-led team structures and manual tasks. And everyone's talking about we're going to have automation and AI reinvent this, but it's very hard to do in these big legacy companies because you're effectively just latching on AI or tech solutions onto already built, like things that they've spent like millions and millions of dollars on. And so, that seemed to, no matter how we tried, should it be an output value based model? Should it be, we tried a few different models under the same legacy group. We just couldn't move away from a way a team is structured. So the nucleus of the way a team is structured is number one. Okay. And then number two is effectively the optics around media being homogenized. And that, which a lot of it was, to be honest, but it's, if you look at a blanket of a media agency proposition, if you're a client and you're seeing like at creds or chemistry stage, you're seeing like 8 different agencies walk in, it's actually very hard outside people to really create a point of differentiation. And so those points of differentiation, still we anchor so much in thinking creativity. But we had to you have to reinvent how you think about that and how you model a business where creativity and thinking can be the top of the pyramid versus the bottom of the pyramid. So creativity and thinking is number 2. And then the third thing is principal media and the way that media is being traded. And, I will not get into detail on this. This is not the time or the environment for this, but I'd say just a reinvention of a trading model of the way that agencies activate and buy and engage with media publishers. The time is now to change. It's only a couple of years until the model busts. It's all going to blow up at some point. And there's got to be a business that starts the journey to get ahead of that curve to make sure that they're working with media partners and publishers in a more sustainable way. So we have a future for publishers and partners versus just driving them to the ground in the way that they buy. So
let's talk about the special sauce, the teams that you build alongside you. And I love the fact that, as a really self-aware and empathetic leader, you've got, it's actually the people that walk alongside me.
Yeah.
What do you look for in those unicorns that walk alongside?
Yeah, it's a great way to describe unicorns. Something that I learned from early days is you've got to find what your own, not just strengths are, but values are, right? So the value piece is really important to me. And it's hard to, you need to go away and sort of sit with yourself to really become at peace of like, what are the values that are really important to you, and how are they become a non-negotiable of the people you surround yourself with.
Why is it so important? Why is that the
Because
non-negotiable?
you're in the weeds with it. You're in almost like 24/7. I mean, people have said it for years. You know, you see people at work more than you see your partners, and like, so you want to be surrounded by yourself. Like, you know, I see these people way more than I see my brothers, sisters, families, partners, and so having people who live and breathe the vision that I am trying to achieve. If we're not all moving in the same direction, they could be the smartest people in the world. But if we've got completely different value alignment, we're not going to be moving. Like, we could do it for a year together, but we're all going to be like, it's not sustainable. We're not going to go the distance together. So the values piece is, as I said, imperative for me. And also, obviously, they need to be smarter than me, right? Like, I've been blown away, like in early days, where you can find people that are very smart creatives or strategists or you know, business leaders in different ways, like even just people coming, whatever age, people straight out of university or, you know, at the end of their career. Like, it's just experience and how I relate to those people have been such a big part of it. And I think, you know, the way that sort of the nucleus has been built, as I mentioned with Chris and Sam, ultimately, yes, they're smart. We all have complementary skill set, and that's been serendipitous. But the thing that is absolutely pivotal between us is unbreakable trust. And in an industry that has so much tall poppy syndrome or certain facades around people, or the fact that people want you to be their best friend because they can get something from you, then you move jobs and you're not their best friend anymore. You need people around you that you can have this sort of unbreakable trust with.
I've got a question for you. And I have the pleasure of knowing all three of you, you know, better than, you know, the standard lay of the land.
Yeah.
And I can see how close you guys are.
Yeah.
How do you, but I also see in the teams that the three of you lead, you create this amazing space for the people that are around you. And how do you, I want to understand how you do that, how you create space for those outside of the trio while maintaining such a galvanized
group. No, that's a great question, because that is also a big part of the recipe. Like, it's never just going to be the three of us. Like, we're in a really, really interesting spot at the moment where we get to scale and build a team, but that's just kind of starting now. We've had 10 years where we've all had big teams underneath us, and we're all building something completely separate. But what's been amazing and incredible, we might come together, like we'll go a fortnight without even like being in the same room together, and we'll spend 15 minutes on the phone together and say this and that. And we just, there's a certain intuition, a certain magic that I can't really quantify on how we can finish each other's sentences almost, where we're like, yeah, we all knew that was the plan for that, and that's the way I've structured my team or whatever. And we're so respectful of one another. Like, I am in daily awe of the guys. Like, Chris Coulter is unbelievable the way he fosters junior talent, and he's actually so passionate about bringing strategists and young creative media people through the industry. And so that harnesses so much respect in itself. And then there's Sam Gear, who's like the biggest chameleon that I've ever met, who can, like, you know, be an amazing strategist in one meeting, and the next meeting, you know, he's doing a P&L meeting with me. And I just think, like, there's certain things that can help you navigate. And then the teams underneath, they learn from those chameleons. Because I also never want, as you're growing through your career, you should have the opportunity to see wider scope of leaders who can do more than just one thing. Like, you don't want a leader to just...
You don't want to become blinkered.
Exactly. Like, and so I think having them as mentors or people that can, you know, that you can aspire to be, and that they can see that they've kind of come from different diversified backgrounds, but also can, you know, project and foster different skill sets is something pretty unique. Yeah.
You would have seen a lot of emerging talent come through your businesses. What's the story around leadership that young media practitioners are convincing themselves of that's just holding them back, that's actually counter to their success?
Yeah. I mentored many young female leaders coming through, and I was like blown away by the talent, the smarts, the confidence that some of these, you know, emerging leaders have. But then you sort of switch the camera off, so to speak, or you take them behind the scenes. And there's this complexity and nervousness that the upcoming generation has that we didn't have. And, there's pros and cons, because I admire their levels of confidence and I didn't have that with my bosses. The fact that there's no officers, they could walk up to us. Everyone's so approachable at sort of leadership level these days. It was very much closed door, corner offices in the world that I grew up with. So it was a very different relationship with leaders back then. And I think they're very lucky that they get that kind of access. And, certain leaders want to give more than that. But I think the surprising element has been how to work on those insecurities with this emerging talent. We see some of the effects that social media are having on this crowd, everything from physical appearances to am I good enough, imposter syndrome, just the pressure on young females as well, around their own fertility challenges. They came to me, a lot come to me and say, how early is too early to be freezing my eggs, because I want a long career ahead of me, but I also want to be a mother at some point. And females are challenged with that because, again, back growing up, women were starting to have children a lot earlier, and this generation is I want to hit certain points in my career, and I don't want to do that until my 30s and 40s. And there's a perception around, well, if I freeze my eggs, I can do it when I'm, whenever, and they'll be fine. But, so I've been very vulnerable around my own stories with that, and, I've been happy to share my own experience. And I think so much about emerging talent is how you can be vulnerable, raw, but share your own experiences so they can genuinely see. If I sit here and write a playbook for them and say, here's a Harvard little
here's the
kind
checklist.
Of book, they can't, they don't absorb that. So I think they only absorb through life experiences. And I saw so many of these patterns coming through where so much of the information they shared with me informed the policies that I created as a leader. And, we were the first ones in the country to create a paid for IVF service and stuff, because I could see so many females challenged with the decision making of that. So it has been, really interesting. And now some of those people that we've funded and supported through that journey are having amazing careers, they're thriving. So, I'm really proud of that. Yeah.
Double barrel question, and I'm going to give it to you in two parts.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to emerging female leaders in the media space, that look to you and go, how do I navigate a world that is increasingly gut-wrenching and anxiety-creating?
Be yourself. And I know authenticity is a word that's so overused, and I hated when people used to say that to me. Yeah. The genuine part of that and breaking down authenticity is if you try and pretend to be someone else and that, you're I'm going to put myself in a box, but only for the next 2 years because I really want to learn more about this industry. So I'm going to go over here, even though I'm not passionate about it, but I'm going to do it because I want to learn about it. It will start eating you alive. And I always made conscious decisions through my career that I said no to a lot of things. And I think that put me on the right path. And what frustrates me about some of the emerging leaders coming through is there's a lot of carrots being thrown around the industry of you seem good, you can come here for another 20 grand. And people just jump and they don't really think about what the future, having a moment with themselves and think about am I passionate about that sector of the industry? Who are my leaders going to be around me? Not just what's the pay packet? There's so many elements. So I would always say you need to look at the ecosystem around you that you're choosing.
Yeah, take a minute.
Take a minute. And I've had a few big sliding door moments in my career that I've said no to, amazing global opportunities, and deciding to stay in Australia where people are why would you do that? The world is your oyster. But also much bigger salary opportunities. But I ask myself these questions. Can I get out of bed every morning and be passionate about X sector? And, you have to be true to yourself, because I see so many people on a treadmill, just running every day, being I'm just getting through. I'm just getting to 5 o'clock. I'm just getting to, and people leave and they're not passionate and stuff. So we all want long, sustainable careers in this industry, and the industry is great and it's thriving and it's changing and it's there are more opportunities than ever. But come back to those values. Like, what do you value most? And we all had separate opportunities, right? And all very good opportunities. Everyone was being poached at different times and stuff, but we made the decision around values. We trusted each other. We knew if we went to build something together, there would be something magic. So you got to take some risks as well.
And make some sacrifices.
Massive sacrifices.
Second part, what advice would you give me, right, as a male leader that wants to enable and empower female practitioners?
I mean, do you know, I've worked with some amazing progressive leaders in my time, and I think this is so important with the company you keep, because if I was in your shoes, I would encourage you to be curious and ask questions that you feel like, should I be asking that question? I'm a bit afraid to ask that question.
No risk there with me.
Exactly. So, but that's rare because there are a lot of males that are like, I just don't want to know. Like we had period leave, right?
The advice is that I was being facetious of that.
No, and like having period leave became a big thing because it was like, and I pulled my male leaders in a room. I'm like, this is what this is. Did you know that, like, even though you've got sisters or wives or daughters or whatever, like, you got to understand some females suffer through this time of the month a lot more than other suffer through. And some men just were like, I don't want to know. Like, this is like an awkward topic. Others were like, tell me more. And, you know, one of the things, like, I talk about my nucleus, and I'll give you an example is, you know, when I was introducing the IVF policy, I remember running Sam through it, and he was a bit like, you know, it was like he's a very progressive male leader, and he was like, okay, sure. But when I announced it to a female town hall only, and I started sort of sharing some of the feedback back with him, he's like, I'm honestly shocked, like, of this response. Like, I thought it would be impactful, but we have no idea that this is impacting almost every female in some way, shape or form. So I would encourage just like that level of curiosity, not to be like, so I can just create 100 policies where I'm ticking the box. Yeah. It's like, no, just so I can even understand, even if the bare minimum is understanding the colleagues around you a bit better, you know, women are from Mars, men are from Venus, like it is a very different way. So I think just... beautifully different. And I think it's, you know, exactly. when we try to over-homogenize, that's equally poor. Exactly, yeah.
I want to go back, you know, and I loved your opening story, this thing that says everything about you. Is there something else that you've had to really work to unlearn?
Yeah. I'm a person that likes to be in control, surprise, of many things around me. And somehow I've kind of managed to do most of that in my career along the way. And the last 6 months has been quite shocking in some of the things I haven't been able to control. And what I mean by that is I talked about some of those success metrics with building an agency, and we've had success, and we shared a lot of that success in the public forum, and that's what this industry does. They love like talking about stuff, right? But we've had the opposite of that in the last 6 months, and there was a trade press piece written a couple of months in that was like, these guys have been here for a year. What have they actually done? And I was like, well, we've only been there for a few months. We resigned like a year ago, sure, but I think because we've had to unlearn the way we even build something where we're not sharing things every week on LinkedIn. You know, we're being very purposeful on when you're trying to build such a differentiated product. You're quiet along the way in doing so because you're sharing with the people you need to share with, like whether that's CMOs or whatever along the way. The industry didn't like that, right? And so people have been filling in the gaps, and that's been really tough. Is the honest truth. And there have been publications, national broadsheet publications, trade publications that have really like attacked us over the last 6 months. And the first one especially really challenged my mindset because I'm like, what have I done to this person? None of this is grounded on facts. I can't believe they've said this. You know, I've got some amazing mentors around me, by the way, who are like, you could put defamation clauses in. You could I'm like, the industry doesn't work that way. So, but what I've had to genuinely unlearn after that first time came a second hit pretty quickly, like a couple of weeks later. And I'm like, I'm going to have to get used to this now. Like there is like some sort of realization that this country, and I've got friends in senior places around the world, is just like got so many trade press publications. They need stories to fill, and some are fantastic, by the way. And you know, I respect so many of the journalists around, but there are some that have just been really intense, and so I've just had to come to peace with that.
How'd you turn off that radio? Because I can imagine, you know, especially being wired, you know, to be ravenous for that sort of feedback. For them to go, actually, I need to turn that off.
Yeah, it took more than you think, more than I thought. Like I had to, you know, I have a very strong personal life. I'd say, I wouldn't say balance, because I never like the words like work-life balance, but the way that personal growth and personal care comes into my life is really important to me. You know, I'm in the ocean swimming every day. I do some meditation, but I found the ocean the most meditative. And I had a moment in the ocean where the reason I love it so much is I have no phones, nothing to bother me. Even if you go to the gym, you can still check your phone and stuff, right? But I was genuine, and the sun was like, it was a very spiritual moment. The sun was sort of breaking through the water at sunrise one morning with dolphins around, all of that. And I just had this moment where I'm like, why do I care so much? And it was such a big shift. And there was another piece a couple of weeks ago that I was just really at peace by. I'm like, and I surprised myself how much I came to peace on that. So yeah, I think they're the things that you're grateful for, because learning is as good as, like, unlearning habits is as strong as learning, right? So I just sort of shifted around that gratitude piece and was like, I'm grateful that life's throwing me these lessons. I'm going to take them. And
so now you're charting a path without a map, right? So to speak, you know, because the map, that feedback, you know, oh, no, don't go there, move it. Yeah. What does that look like for you guys now?
We've found our own way of sort of building what success looks like, and some of those metrics that we believe that success brings. And it isn't the traditional win accounts, do this, great work. Like all of that will come, right? Like the outputs are the same.
But
fantastic industry work. Well, you know, we're there in terms of that stuff, but that's not what I'm driving towards. Success just looks different to us. Yes, there's successful outputs, but I think the original reason, back to the aftermath of the win, is how do we genuinely help to overcome industry challenges and build a new model? When we see success off that model, and that we can see the metrics of things that are changing, and the industry is moving, it starts to shift into different ways because of a model we're built, that's what the success looks like. And we've got a word that we use, the three of us, it's horizon. And we literally just, every time there's something that like might set us back, we're just like horizon. And we just keep our focus so set on the horizon now. And we're going to have a million setbacks along, but we'll get to that horizon, and like we're relentless around getting there.
I have absolutely no doubt, mate. All right. I want to finish this this very insightful chat, mate, with 3 short untold stories. Mel, when was the last time you surprised yourself?
So we talk about learning and unlearning.
Yep.
Learning, I've had probably my biggest learning curve. I've sat on a few boards. I sit on the board for Swimming Australia. It's a completely different world outside your own industry world. And the learning of governance, risk, integrity has been an amazing learning curve. And I think the way that I can really show up in a community that is swimming and create my own legacy, that's something of national pride as well. Like when our team's at the Olympics, I honestly like tear up when one of our Olympians is jumping in the water. I just like the dedication of their life and the family's life around them that gets them to that point motivates me so much that I love what I'm building and the legacy I can create with being sort of a board member of that community. And honestly, I've surprised every time I'm able to contribute into that sport in some way, it surprises myself, because I didn't even know that I could, that I was capable of that. I still, we still all have elements of imposter syndrome, and I'm like, what am I doing? How can I contribute? So, I'm always like trying to make sure that I have a way to turn up.
You're still the 5-year-old girl going with dad to the quarter time.
Absolutely. Like,
What part of your life, or what part of you, I should say, still feels in progress?
I'd say the unlearning, because, I feel like sometimes, it's just iterations of oneself, right? Like, I am constantly trying to change and evolve as a person. And I think I'm more proud of the person that I am today, that I can be sort of secure in myself to make decisions that I make. But that evolves every single day, right? I get to a point where I have a really challenging month or week, and I feel so disappointed in myself. I feel like I let myself down so much, and I still have that quarter time address, like it's not good enough, you need to do better. So I think I feel like, how can you not be in progress, like a work in progress, your entire life? Like I am open for that.
When that radio turns on, what pulls you out of that?
I'm just, I have a rare ability to pull myself out of certain things and compartmentalize, because I think and I've touched on this publicly, but I've had a lot of personal challenges around like fertility and miscarriages and things that are huge personal setbacks in life. And you still somewhat have to turn up to work the next day, right? And so I sort of have found a way of a coping mechanism, and it is like a way of compartmentalizing, and it never goes away, is the truth. It's the coping mechanisms. It's I'm just going to get in the ocean. I'm going to find the ways to get around that, because if I didn't have that, my coming home and just like taking my dog for a walk and starting my days with my dog, like those are the things that honestly I couldn't be happier in those moments. Like I am just probably the happiest I've ever been in my life, with all the challenges that still evolve. Like you still feel so grateful.
That's a wonderful position of privilege. All right, last one from me, buddy. If this chapter of your life had a name, what would it be? And what would you hope the next chapter would be called?
I would say from insecurity to security. Like,
oh, good name. All right.
And I think I would deep dive on that, just sort of in reflection of the previous question, just really around that journey of blocking out noise and feeling more secure as a person, and the constant work that one has to do on themselves to prove things out, and the little bricks along the way that you build, whether that's in the workplace. Accenture have been unbelievable supporters of what we're building, and it makes me feel more secure when you think that, have you achieved what you set out to achieve in the first month or the second month or the third month? Is that good enough for the people around? And to have elements of support from the workplace, from the communities that I volunteer for, whether it's in swimming or whatever. I'm a part of a leadership organisation called YPO, and those guys and the mentors around that have been incredible for me to help me get to a place that I can feel proud of, for the person that I am, not just the person that I should be. And so I think those constant little bricks and the communities that are around you, and the people you surround yourself with, and the values that you stick to and so important to you, I think help really shape that from insecurity to security.
And what would the next chapter be called? What would you hope it's called?
It's proving it out. I think that is something I'm just still focused on, and even with being feeling a lot more kind of secure on a day-to-day basis, I'd say I'm still so driven to prove things out, whether it's proving the model, proving the industry, taking on a global stage. There's a lot of drive and energy that I have over, I'd say that's the next chapter. There's 100 chapters to come, and yeah.
But you have a smile on your face as you say it, which I love.
Yeah.
Mate, thank you so much for your candour and your wisdom. I think we should all be so lucky to learn from your perspective. And I wish you and the gents nothing but success in what you're building.
Thank you, Dan. It's been wonderful.